From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Well, happy Thursday evening, everybody. Rhori Johnston in the OpenLine chair tonight. We are glad you're with us. Can you believe it's the last day of March? Now, of course, OpenLine, we're going to run encore presentations of this, so it might be a few days from now. But as of right now, we are wrapping up March, and that means the Tennessee General Assembly is beginning to wrap up their work. So tonight we are going to focus on Tennessee gun legislation this year in 2022, and I know it can be a hot button topic, but that's great. We want to put it out there, and we open our phone line. 737+ is the number if you would like to call in and ask a question or a comment. And we're pleased to welcome our guest tonight, Jessie McKinney, via Zoom. Hi, Jessie. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure. Jessie is a volunteer. She is with a group called Moms Demand Action, the Tennessee chapter, because we know that this is throughout the country. So we'll start with, tell us a little bit about Moms Demand Action and then how you got involved.
Yeah, sure. Well, Moms Demand Action is a grassroots organization that is working to promote gun safety and the passage of common sense gun laws to help protect our families and communities. We had 8 million supporters all across the country. We're in every state and the District of Columbia. Here in Tennessee, we have a Tennessee chapter with volunteers that range all the way from Memphis to the Tri-Cities area. And what's really interesting about our group here in Tennessee is that we're composed of all kinds of people. We have teachers and moms and grandparents and veterans and gun owners and rural communities and suburban communities and urban communities, and we're all working together to promote the common goal of creating a safer Tennessee.
All right. And again, how did you first get involved? What was your impetus?
You know, a lot of people that are involved in Moms Demand Action have a personal connection to having their lives touched tragically by gun violence. And that is not the case with me. I'm a mom, and like so many other moms, I think, in Tennessee, I just got tired of seeing the news stories every day of another shooting, another mass shooting in the news, another gun found on a school campus, or I think what is most tragic for me as a mom is another child who unintentionally gains access to a weapon and shoots themselves or somebody else. And I just saw that the tragedy of gun violence is all around us. And I knew that I didn't have the answer to fix all the problems, but I knew I couldn't stay on the sidelines and just sit and wait for more bad things to happen. So I had to get in the game and work to make my community safer.
Sure. So as a volunteer, what kind of work do you do?
Yeah, you know, I'm a volunteer, and we do different things. So right now it is legislative session in Nashville. So one of the things that we do is work with our lawmakers to pass common sense gun laws that are going to help keep us safer. Another aspect of our work is that we work to promote education on safe gun storage. Right now, there's an estimated 4.6 million children in the United States who live in a home with a gun that is loaded and unlocked. And we can save lives without having to pass a single law if we communicate to family members and to gun owners the importance of making sure that their weapons are secured, locked, and out of the hands of children. So that's another big part of what we do.
Sure. And we know in Tennessee, with a predominantly Republican legislature, and lots of hunters, fishermen, lots of gun owners in Tennessee. How do you tell someone maybe on the other side of an argument, assure them, hey, we're not trying to take your guns. This is what we're trying to do, because there's a lot of money on both sides with lobbying and whatnot. How do you kind of approach the debate or approach lawmakers who, you know, might support something that you don't want passed?
Yeah, you know, it's a difficult conversation to have. And I think what has happened is that so many times we don't listen to each other anymore.
Right.
And when someone meets me and they understand that I'm from Moms Demand Action, they have an idea of what they think I want to happen. And I am not in the business of taking anyone's guns
Right.
away. I don't want to repeal the Second Amendment. That is not what Moms Demand Action is about. And so I really try to steer the conversation to remind people that we want the same things. We want safe communities. We want our children to grow up. We don't want to be touched by the violence and the tragedy that is gun violence. And so we want the same things. Sometimes we don't always agree on this, how to get there in the same way. But I think if we keep in mind that we are working towards the same goal, we just have different approaches. And when we can listen and understand where each person is coming from, that's ultimately how we can make a difference. And, you know, a big part of Moms Demand Action is working to create a culture of gun safety, of responsible gun ownership. And I've had so many conversations with hunters and with people who have grown up with firearms as part of their family heritage and part of their culture. But they also understand that a gun is a deadly weapon.
Yeah.
It's not a toy. And, you know, that secure storage is so important. And I find that that is something that oftentimes we all can agree on.
Yeah, I agree too. I think you can connect there. And I've had the same conversations with many friends and families who, like you said, are gun owners. And right away, when you talk about common sense, most of the people I've talked to or friends or family members of mine who are gun owners, they're very responsible, very cognizant. You know, they have gun safes, they have lock boxes. They're very, very careful. And most people agree that's a responsibility if you're a gun owner, that you need to be trained. You need to make sure your kids know. You know, no one wants that kind of thing to happen. And yet, like you mentioned, the statistics, we hear about these things all the time. I was going to bring up too, here locally in our newsroom, we get emails and news releases from the Metro Police Department a couple times a month about guns stolen from cars. And we did a whole series of Broken the Juvenile Justice System. You know, so many kids, juveniles who have strayed, are just easily opening car doors and finding loose guns in cars. And then those guns can be traced to violent crimes or robberies, etc., you know, weeks or months later. How do we, and most responsible gun owners would say that's ridiculous. You know, where do we hold people accountable? How do we get the word out about not just leaving your gun irresponsibly in an unlocked car overnight, but same thing in the house?
Yes, and this is a real problem in the state of Tennessee. I know that the news media has actually done a great job communicating just how big of a problem guns being stolen from cars is. And, you know, I think it starts with, again, creating that culture of responsible gun ownership and sharing the information. I think, like you mentioned, the stories that you have done puts the information out there. And I do think there's a role for legislation to play in this. I do think there's a place where we can have secure storage be part of our law, where if you have a gun and it is in your car, it needs to be locked. You know, you need to be responsible that your weapon does not fall into the hands of someone who is legally prohibited from having it. And so you should take that responsibility to lock it up. And right now, I do think legislation might be something that needs to happen for that to come into play.
Right. So speaking of legislation, we're coming up on our first break here in a second, and we're going to dive into what's happening here in the Tennessee legislature. And like I said to you before this program began, I hope you can kind of update me. Things move quickly, so we can get kind of an update on where we are. And usually gun safety advocates are fighting proposals that are there, but this year also there are some actual proposals that are being supported. One of them is a bill that would allow a family member or law enforcement to petition the court to get a gun away from someone who might be at risk of harming themselves or others. We're going to dive into that as well, because that's a case where you say, well, how do you know, who can determine if this person's at risk or whatnot? So we're gonna dive into that a little bit after this break. So stay with us, everybody. Our guest is Jessie McKinney. The topic is Tennessee gun legislation, important for everybody. We'll be right back.